Hey everyone, it's May, and welcome to the final episode of the May Lee Show of 2020. What a year this has been for all of us. I mean, right off, I can easily say, and I don't think anybody would disagree, that 2020 sucked major ass for obvious reasons. I wasn't even sure I was going to do this sort of year-ender episode because I just want this year to go away and just get on with 2021. But then I thought, it might be nice to sort of reflect on the things that have happened over the course of this year because the May Lee Show launched at the beginning of 2020 with very high hopes and uncertainty and, a lot of sort of like, don't know what's going to happen. Let's just give this a whirl. That's kind of the attitude that I had and Benny Luo, my partner at NextShark, had when we launched this show in early February. So I thought, okay, you know what? It might be kind of nice to look at the year behind us, the good, the bad, and the ugly together. So I thought I'd make it an even more special occasion given the fact that it is New Year's Eve right now as I'm shooting the show. And so I got a little glammed up for you guys. Look at this. I put in major effort here. Put my hair up. For those of you who are watching the video, you can see. Put my hair up and I put on a very glittery, very sequency jacket. I put on some fancy, some fake, some real jewelry. And I put on false eyelashes. Look at that. I only put on falsies for very special occasions, like when I would have to cover like the Golden Globes and the Oscars and things like that and be on the red carpet. I would put on false eyelashes, and then other like very fancy events. But I haven't put on false eyelashes all year. Clearly because there's been no reason to do so. But I decided today, last year of 2020, for the year-ender show of the May Lee Show, why not? So here we go. I'm all glammed out. And even Godzilla back here, I put on some ribbon and a little decoration around his neck. He's probably very unhappy about it, but hey, it's just, for this episode. So where do I even begin? 2020, as I said, has sucked such bad ass because of COVID-19 and then all the xenophobia that started up because of COVID. And I looked back at all the shows, and again, this is the 51st episode this year. That's a lot of episodes. That's not bad. So the first episode that we actually debuted at the very, very beginning of February was with me and Benny Luo of NextShark, because we wanted to introduce the idea of the show and why we were launching this show. We wanted to tell everyone that this was going to be a show that really focused on Asian American issues and personalities and topics and things that our community, the AAPI community, cares about. And so it started off on that track. And so we had already recorded a few episodes prior to the official launch of the show because, we wanted to have a couple shows in the can. So, our second show after that we released was with entrepreneur Tony Ko, who is, of course, a friend of mine, but she's also an extremely successful businesswoman. She is the one who started NYX Cosmetics, and then it was bought out by L'Oreal for just a ton of money. I'm just going to say shit ton of money. And then she's gone on to create other businesses. In fact, Tony, just this week, has launched a line with Jason Wu, a cosmetics line, the fashion designer Jason Wu, and it's coming out in places like Target. It's going to be one of another concept where it's going to be affordable cosmetics. So, Tony was a great person to feature on the show because she represented a success story, an Asian success story, coming from very humble beginnings, being an immigrant from Korea, and then becoming this, multi-jillionaire, all because of her own hard work and ambition. But so we had that show, and then we had recorded shows with Cassie Ho and Kevin Kreider. But then all of a sudden, COVID started gaining some speed, but it was still something that people weren't focusing on because it was still seemingly an Asia issue. So news media wasn't really covering it on a regular basis. But I had a suspicion that there's something weird going on. And also, we started hearing reports about racism against Asians because Asians were overall being blamed for COVID because it had started in China. So I then thought, you know what? I think I need to start talking about this on the show. So that's when the show started pivoting a little bit from its initial mission of just covering, business and celebrity and social issues, but then all of a sudden COVID and xenophobia started becoming an issue. So I did a show in early February about that, about the virus and the growing racism. So, Benny and I were reflecting, saying that, our show was kind of one of the first to really start talking about xenophobia against Asians and how it was becoming a problem. So then we kind of kept on rolling out other episodes that we had done. Ben Baller was a great episode. He's, Ben Baller is like, he just kind of talks straight, right? And, he drops the F-bomb every other word. So that was really, look, I dropped the F-bomb too, so you guys know that. But Ben was great. He was willing to come on the show when it had just started, really. And that was what made me so proud and happy and humbled and flattered that he saw that NextShark and I were launching a show. He didn't know me per se. He knew NextShark, he knew Benny, and he had the faith in what we were trying to do, that thinking that it was a really good thing. And so he reached out and was willing to come on the show. Which, was a huge thing for us because we were just starting. Nobody knew about the show. Nobody knew that it existed, but he was willing to come on as a very, very early guest. And it was a great show, highly entertaining, so interesting. We're talking about everything from his business to, racism, to, just the AAPI community and how we have to support each other. So it was a great show. Was so happy to have him on the show. Adele Lim was another great guest early on. She came on and talked about her incredible career so far as a writer, but also the controversy over the pay disparity that she discovered when she was working on Crazy Rich Asians 2. And she found out that her screenwriter, what do you call it? Yeah, screenwriter. He was getting paid double what she was getting paid. So she decided to walk. To prove a point and to take a stand. Got huge props for that from everyone because of what she had done. She was standing up for women. She was standing up for people of color. And she was standing up against a giant industry like the film business that, got away with doing this for a very long time. So she came on the show to talk about that, which was terrific. But other things too. She's great. Adele is a woman that I admire because she's so much like how I am when it comes to just telling it like it is, being very straightforward, not taking shit from anybody, and being who she is in a very genuine, authentic way. So thank you, Adele, for coming on. And what was funny was that, some of these shows we had shot prior to COVID becoming a bigger thing. So when we released Adele's episode, I realized, wow, this might seem a little bit dated. So we have to update the show somehow and add an extra few minutes at the end of the show. So I reached out to Adele and asked if she was willing to come on again, just to give us an update about what her life was like and how she was dealing with COVID and quarantining and all of that stuff. So she was very willing to do that, which was great. So the show became what we had recorded before, and then the extra 20 minutes of an update from her. And of course, we did it via Skype because when, we were all told to shelter in place, everybody had to, again, pivot, especially media people. We had to pivot and start shooting things online rather than going on location. So we could no longer meet with people face to face and record the show that way. We had to do everything this way on Skype or Zoom. That was our only option. Funnily enough, though, that actually made it a little bit easier to get other people to agree to come on the show because they no longer had to be convinced to meet somewhere or come to a studio or, this and that. They could just do it from home. So in some ways, COVID and being quarantined and being ordered to shelter in place helped people to be a little bit more open to come on a show and spend some time with me. And that was really great because, again, when I started looking back at all the shows we did, man, I was just like looking at the list of people, right? Maggie Q, Daniel Wu, Kelly Hu, Kevin Quan, Bowen Yang, Shannon Lee, Mia Kang, Sophia Chang, James Lee, Anko Tron, Daniel Martin, Wendy Nguyen, Helen Zia, Jasmine. I mean, the list goes on. I'm going to go back and talk about a couple of the guests and shows, but it was truly astounding how many people were willing to come on. And then when they came on, their willingness to be so open and so generous with their time, but not only just their time, generous with their stories and their truth and their honesty about their lives, their hurts, their successes, their failures, their worries, all of that. And so it's been a really interesting time to talk to people heart to heart because we've all been obviously thinking a lot about the current situation, how it's affecting us short-term, long-term, spending a lot of time thinking at home about things. So it was really great connecting with people that you only see on the screen or TV, and then being able to connect with them on a more personal level and seeing that, look, we're all the same. We all have the same fears. We all have the same wants. We all have the same desire to be together and connect and love and, and feel safe. So that is something that I think COVID and this pandemic and this crisis has helped us realize that we do need to come together. We do need to share, together in an unusual way, right? Together yet apart kind of way. But yeah, so we started the show, like I said, thinking that it was going to be one thing, but then slowly started to pivot, addressing the very social issue, the social crisis that was happening with racism and xenophobia. And so I did that one show, but then in early March, I did another COVID show because the racism was starting to get really out of control. And there were so many more incidents of racism, not just in the US, but around the world. And so I had to address that again. But I was definitely much more emotional and descriptive about how I was feeling about what was happening. Because I wanted to express my fear and my concerns for our community and wanted to share that because I knew that so many of you felt the same way. And when I did, the response was amazing because a lot of you wrote to me and said, oh my God, I'm feeling the same way. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. It's making me nervous. And so it proved to me that, I needed to use the show to speak out and represent, to at least be some sort of outlet for the AAPI community and beyond, to feel like they weren't alone, to share in what we were all going through, to connect, and then to feel more empowered. That's when all of a sudden I started using the term warriors. I wanted all of you to be like a warrior, to fight back against this kind of hate. And so, that show did really well, the COVID, update show. And then I started doing another show about security and how, we could get some tips from a security expert about how to keep safe. I mean, that's the extent it was getting to, right? Because we were starting to feel physically unsafe about what was going on. So, I mean, I really started like delving into the many aspects of COVID. One show that got some attention as well was, I think we called it the deafening silence of, Asian Americans. The reason why we did that show was because what I was noticing was that even though there are all these racist acts taking place and, we were hearing about it on social media. People were telling us about it. We saw the video of people getting attacked, people getting, slashed, a family getting slashed in Texas. But for some reason, a lot of high-profile Asian Americans were not speaking up. They were not saying anything. They were not supporting, the movement of being anti-racist against Asians. And so I, again, took a step and started asking that question on this show about, where are you? Why aren't you saying anything? Look, I tried to understand also that it was because when you're high profile and when you're in a position where you rely on the popularity and support of fans, and then you're, a film studio or a television studio might be backing you, you're afraid that if you speak up about something too controversial, you might lose your gig or something might happen. But my point at that time, and still is, when something so extreme like racism is happening against an entire community, and it started from the top, right? Trump was calling it the China virus and Kung flu and blaming Asians and not saying anything to quell the racism. When you have a big platform, you have to speak up. Right? You got to take a stand. You have to use that platform for good, for change, even though it might hurt a little bit. You got to do it because at the end of your life, you sure as hell aren't going to say, wow, I wish I had made another movie, or I wish I had done more television shows for that short-term glory. You're going to ask yourself, what did I do to make a difference? What did I do that made an impact, a true impact on people's lives when things got really shitty? So yeah, I was pushing, certainly in this episode, and intentionally so. And we heard from a couple of people wondering who I was talking about. I wasn't talking about anyone in particular per se, but I was just making that general observation and sharing it with everyone. But I also took the time to do a couple of shows recognizing the heroes of COVID-19. And I really wanted to talk to doctors and nurses and experts and volunteers about their experience on the front lines, and also why they wanted to lend a hand and what inspired them. So I did a couple of different shows talking to doctors and, frontline workers. And those were really gratifying. Heartbreaking, but very gratifying. And then, of course, I started covering the story that exploded, which was Lena Hernandez. She was the woman in Torrance, California, who was caught on camera a couple of times verbally assaulting a woman who was working out in the park, and then a man and his two children. She was just saying the most horrendous racist things to these people, saying, go back to China, go back to where you came from, we don't want you here, just horrific stuff. And then it was found out that she had actually physically assaulted another Asian American woman the year prior at a shopping mall, and the police had just bungled that case and just dropped it and ignored it instead of pursuing it. And when this woman, Casey Salmanow, saw the more recent videos of this same woman, Lena Hernandez, attacking these people, she realized, oh my God, the police never did anything about my case. So I was able to track Casey down, and we developed a relationship, and she came on the show to talk to me about her story about being assaulted by Lena Hernandez. I spoke to the attorney who started taking on these cases, and Sandy Roja, and did a couple of shows on that. And those shows and those videos that I did talking about these incidents really took off. They went viral because this was such a globally phenomenal, in terms of interest. It went global. People from all over the world were calling the Torrance Police Department and the city council and the mayor demanding justice. But Casey, in the beginning, she was somebody who was, naturally shy. She did not want to be in the limelight. She did not want the attention, but then she realized that she needed to take a stand. So she mustered up her courage that she had inside all along and became a warrior. And she fought this all the way to court. And Lena Hernandez finally did get convicted. The sentence was pretty light, but she at least did get finally convicted for what she had done to her, assaulting her in the bathroom of a shopping mall. But that was a story that came out of nowhere. But because of these videos that went viral immediately, the community, not just Asian community, just the public in general, really reacted so strongly that this was a story that got a lot of attention for good reason. And so I used Lena Hernandez and these incidents as an example of, if you speak out, if you speak up, if you fight back, if you push back, then you can get results. At least people will pay attention. If you never say anything, if you stay silent, if you hope it just goes away, and if you just keep your head down, like the traditional Asian way has always been, we'll never get anywhere. We'll never be heard. We'll never be taken seriously. And this shit will continue to happen. And guess what? We do know that these racist acts are still happening. We see it almost on a daily basis, right? We see the videos. Believe me, I get the videos sent to me, and we see that this behavior is still happening, the attacks against Asians. So that should go to show you that we need to continue pushing back. We need to continue saying, no, this is not okay. This is not okay that you can shit on Asians and get away with it. So I know it can be frustrating, and I know it can be at times really disheartening, because you're thinking, why is it that the Asian community gets picked on like this and nothing ever happens? Well, it's slow going. We got to keep pushing. We got to keep fighting. You got to think about like the African American community, right? They've been fighting racism and slavery for 400 years, right? So this is something that we have to know. It's a slow journey, but we have to keep moving forward. We can't just stay still, right? So that was one of the big stories that happened this year amongst the Asian American community that we covered. And then, of course, the elections, the presidential elections. That was a story, obviously, that was of interest to everyone. But I definitely wanted to cover that as well from an Asian perspective, because Asian Americans in the past weren't very involved in politics, and they also, for sure, had one of the lowest voter turnouts in previous presidential elections. But slowly, it's been changing. As the demographics have been changing, and as the Asian mentality has been changing about politics and involvement. So that was a good thing to cover, because we really wanted to get the vote out. We really wanted to try to make a difference in terms of letting people know that voting matters, especially when it comes to a president who really didn't give a rat's ass about the Asian community and continued to call the COVID-19, the China virus, and Kung flu. And so I think that certainly motivated the community to a certain extent, because with bad leadership like that, nothing will change. Only actually things got worse because of that. So that was, again, another big story of 2020. And then in terms of just the conversations I've had with people that were surprising, and even they admitted that they had never had an interview like this or talked about certain things about their lives ever before with an interviewer or a journalist. I know, Bowen Yang came on and he said he was a big fan of the show. And of course I was like, oh my God, really? So Bowen of SNL came on, and he was we were talking about, his career, but also talking about when he came out of the closet and how that affected his parents, and the fact that, they tried to put him through conversion therapy, and he went along with it because of the idea of filial piety. And, only Asians understand that concept. You do things for your elders because of filial piety, whether you agree with it or not sometimes, right? Because of that ultimate respect we have for our elders. And so he was saying, I understood why my parents felt this way, because they didn't know any better. They had come from China, and, being gay and homosexuality was just something that was so foreign to them. So they didn't know any better. So he said, I don't hold it against them. And so I just thought that was so powerful to say that. But it was really cool for him to talk about that openly. And again, because I'm Asian and the show is about, Asian issues and topics and mentality, I can ask questions that, and let's be frank, like a white interviewer is never going to ask, or never even going to think about asking, or never understand, because they're not Asian. They didn't grow up with this idea. They didn't grow up with Asian parents or being immigrants. So I try to ask questions to my guests that come from an Asian place, come from a level of understanding that only a fellow Asian can understand. And that is what makes what I do on the Daily Show, I think, more unique compared to if you turned on Entertainment Tonight or, Extra, because they're never going to ask those questions because they're not going to know. So Bowen was great. Shannon Lee, Bruce Lee's daughter, she was fantastic because she was, again, talking about very intimate things about her father, her memories of her father, and what kind of impact he's had on the world, but also the death of her brother, Brandon, where she talks about the grief that she went through and, the double whammy of losing him after her father. So that was again, a very unique interview that you wouldn't normally hear elsewhere. The idea of the Asian background, the Caucasian background, the conflict sometimes, and, for her just like not knowing her place and identity. So she was terrific. I loved her, and she was so, I thought she was so honest about her continuing evolution, that she's continuing to evolve as a person. And I thought that was awesome, because I feel like we all need to realize that no matter how young, old you are, you're always evolving. You should always feel like you're growing. So she was great. Loved her. And then Kevin Quan, the author of Crazy Rich Asians, he had come out with his newest book, Sex and Vanity. He told me something that I was very flattered. I had asked him about, his Asian background and how that affects his writing, and how one of his characters, it was about, again, the lack of identity or not knowing identity, and the depth of that book, and that it wasn't just a frivolous book about rich people again, that there was a depth to it, because he was also trying to unveil the idea of bicultural identity and where you belong, and how one culture may not accept you and the other one might not accept you, and like, how does that make someone feel? And again, and he said that a very high profile book critic, I can't remember if it was Washington Post or New York Times, somebody, he said, yeah, she had dismissed the book as something that like missed the mark, and because she didn't get it. She totally didn't get what he was trying to write about. And so he appreciated the fact that I was asking questions that, that hit exactly what he was trying to convey through his book. So that was, I was very humbled by his comments. And then, I've had some great people in the beauty and fashion world. I mentioned Tony Ko. Anko Tron, hairstylist to the stars, actually came and gave me a haircut in my backyard. And then we had a great interview about his humble beginnings as a Vietnamese refugee with his family, coming on a boat and, going to Malaysia for a couple years at a camp and then finally making it to the US, and then how he rose, up the ranks of the hairstyling world. What a nice, humble, lovely guy. Seriously. I loved talking to him. Daniel Martin was another great makeup artist. Again, he's half Vietnamese and half Caucasian, American French. And he was wonderful, so humble. He did the makeup for Meghan Markle for her royal wedding, but sweet, humble, rooted, stable, just, no airs about him at all. So totally enjoy talking to him. And Wendy Nguyen of Wendy's Lookbook. That was an interview that could have been just fun and frivolous and talking about fashion and beauty and all of that. Because, Wendy's Lookbook is all about that glamour and fun and beauty. But I wanted to dig deeper. And she had not that long ago opened up about the fact that she had been sexually molested for years, since the age of 5. And we dug deeper into that. And it was so powerful. It was so revealing. It was so genuine. It was so surprising in some ways, but she was so willing to be open about her experiences because she wanted to make a difference. She wanted to help others who had gone through the same thing. She wanted others to feel that they weren't alone. So that, to me, was a very powerful interview to show that courage comes in so many different forms. And you can't judge a book by its cover. A lot of people might be like, oh, Wendy, yeah, she's just so cute and pretty and she loves fashion and handbags and what. No, she's got depth, and she's got such heart and such a giving heart even after everything that she herself has been through. So that was really amazing. Activists I've spoken to, she's a Shahid. She's somebody who has worked with Malala, but then she branched off on her own to start her own sort of foundation and also, help craftsmen from all over the world bring their work to market. And she has done phenomenally well with this creation called the Always Pan. I don't know if you guys see the ads on like Facebook and Instagram, whatever. The Always Pan that like multi-uses, taking off like a rocket. It's amazing. But a lot of the proceeds are going back to, the people who created it and the artisans and all of that. So she's definitely somebody who's trying to use for profit to help charity and, to give back. So loved her. Helen Zia, had her on the show. I mean, what can I say? It's Helen Zia, legendary activist for the Asian American community. And she is someone who continues to fight for, not just Asian Americans, but just communities of color, the LGBTQ community. So she is somebody who's legendary, huge. She's a huge hero of mine. So loved having her on the show. And the last show I did just recently was Jasmine Cho, and she is the cookie activist. She's a young woman who started making these portrait cookies and started, focusing on heroes from the AAPI community and others, but really focusing on AAPI community and, people in history who a lot of us wouldn't have known about. But she creates these unbelievable works of art in cookie form to educate and inform. And she was an absolute delight. I wanted to do a Christmas themed show about cookies, but then I realized, oh my God, this woman is so much more than cookies. So we had a great conversation about the importance of finding your purpose. And if that purpose is to make cookies to inform and educate people about AAPI history and heroes and, different stories, then that is the way that she's living out her mission. So, look, it's been a phenomenal year in terms of where the show started and where it is now. It hasn't been easy because This is a show that we do on no budget, and we don't make money. And so, it's a labor of love. I have to admit, there have been times where I asked myself, do I keep doing this? As much as I would love to say that doing something for free, if it has a purpose, is fine with me. Look, let's get real. There are moments when I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can do this for free. But every time I get a note or a message from somebody on Instagram or Facebook with such words of praise, but also thanking me for the show and for the things I talk about, that really makes a huge difference. And that encourages me to continue, because clearly it is resonating. What I'm saying and the show is resonating somehow. And that makes me really, really happy. So that gives me motivation. I'll share this one story that just recently happened to me. A friend of mine, neighbor here, she told me she went to her dentist. She's white. She's she's probably like 70. She's white. She went to her dentist, who's apparently Japanese American man. And she said that all of a sudden he asked her, do you have a boat? And she's like, yeah, I do. And she thought that was strange that he would ask that question. Then he comes back from his office and holds up a book. And it's my book, May Lee Live and in Person. And she was like, oh my God, why do you have that book? And he said, because I'm a huge fan of May Lee. I listen to her podcast all the time. And I also follow her on Instagram. And I happened to see a photo of you two on a boat and put it together. And so he was like telling my neighbor, her show is so great. It so represents Asian American issues and topics. And I really, really enjoy it. And I listen and watch it all the time. And I got her book because I wanted to read it. Now that is just so random. I do so random. But again, it's just the story I needed to hear, because I was thinking about the end of the year and this past year and how difficult it's been and the challenges that we've all gone through, and wondering, like, 2021, do I continue? If so, how do I continue? Is anyone going to care? Is the audience going to be there? So I think that maybe that was a message, hopefully, of that I was getting some words of encouragement from a stranger through my neighbor. So I thought that was so random. But, messages come in interesting forms sometimes. But I'm hoping that 2021 is going to be a better year for us all. Let's hope and pray. And I certainly hope and pray that, that we get this COVID-19 under control to a certain extent. I certainly hope and pray that those of us who are suffering, especially those who have lost their jobs, lost their homes, that they find some sort of relief, and that we can get on and come together as a country, as a world, and have that compassion, that empathy for each other to get through all of this. So thank you to you for supporting the show, for watching the show, for listening to the show, for sending in your comments, giving me encouragement when I need it. If it hadn't been for you guys, obviously I wouldn't have continued this show through the year, because I would have said there's no audience, there's no interest. But there has been, and I hope that it will continue to grow. And I hope the best for each and every one of you. Even in the toughest times, just know that we are all in this together. So keep your chin up and keep the fight going. Be courageous, be warriors, and we'll be in this together going into 2021. So thank you for your support. Happy New Year. Good riddance to 2020. Yeah, dumpster fire, gone. Let's move forward and make it a good one, okay? All right, love you guys. See ya.